Testing 1 2, testing 1 2, testing 1 2. What's going on, everybody? Donnie Rouse here, and today I want to talk about your life and for you to really get a feel for where are you in life. What are the day-to-day emotions that you feel, and what is the meaning that you are attaching to those? Are you telling yourself that life sucks, life is hard, uh, life is challenging, life is whatever it is? Fill in that blank. Because in this episode here, I want to tell you a story, and I want to challenge your assumptions on your life, not on anyone else's, not what anyone else thinks your life should be, but on what you think your life should be. The inspiration behind this podcast came from literally being on the verge of burnout, because during the summer, most of my weeks are literally just mirror images of the previous week, doing production, doing deliveries, doing markets, and then repeat. And in the small breaks that I have, some of it is just recovering, not even wanting to do anything, but also taking small strides forward to make sure that I'm always progressing for the goals I have. So this past week, so usually around the time in August, I hit this kind of threshold where my body's like, all right, I am tapping out. So this past Saturday, I finished the farmer's market, and then I went home, and my body was just shut down. So I literally took a nap. I took a hour nap, and then I woke up and I felt a little bit more clear, a little bit better. The weather outside was beautiful, so I said, well, what can I do for myself? What's gonna just give me bring some joy to this day? Because to be honest with you, I had been feeling very heavy for the last, few months. And some of the reason behind that heaviness that I was feeling was the comparison to others in terms of where I should be in my life. It was telling myself that things aren't happening fast enough for me. And so I took the break, and I was going down to the beach, which I normally go to sling up a hammock, eat dinner, and then watch the sun go down. But one of the aspirations I had was like, you know what? I want to just start exploring sunset spots in Stanford. Like, let me find like the highest peaks where I can get the best view and watch sunset from there. One of the inspirations, or one of the things I wanted to do, was I wanted to go to the Stanford Mall because they have a pretty high parking garage. And in that parking garage, if you go to the top, I've never been to the top, but I would assume you have an amazing view of the sunset. So where I was at that verge, I could have turned left and made my way towards the beach, but I continued straight and went down towards the Stanford Mall. I get up to the mall, and I'm circling around the parking lot, climbing to the top level. And I pull in, and I'm trying to find a parking spot, and surprisingly, there were no parking spots around. And I moved up towards to go to the roof, and it was roped off. Like, you weren't allowed to go there. So as I suspect that different car companies are actually putting their inventory, storing their inventory in this garage, because there wasn't a parking lot. All these cars looked new. They had like the protective layer on parts of the car. So I said, okay. So I continued to drive around. I parked a little bit further out, and then I made my walk up that ramp and kind of jumped the little barrier, the little chain that they put off. On the roof of the parking lot, there was nobody there, right? It was completely empty except for all the some of the seagulls, and it looked like the seagulls were bombed the top of the parking lot with poop. It was just like everywhere. No person kind of noticed. And I was looking for a spot, so I went down to sit on this lamp base. But it was kind of awkward because it was a diamond shape, and the way it was positioned, if I were sitting on it, I wouldn't be looking at sunset, but rather I'd be looking somewhere off in the distance, and I'd have to turn my body in an uncomfortable angle. A little bit further out, there was a mound there, and there was maybe like 5 feet by 4 feet. So I decided to just sit down there. There was one little spot that was not bombed with pigeon poop. So I sat myself there, And I continued to, open up my container and to have my dinner there, watching the sun as it was starting to set. Up there, because there was nobody there, it just felt super, super quiet. I mean, granted, that time of the day usually inspires or evokes that feeling of calmness, knowing that the day is coming to an end. Things are starting to quiet down. People are starting to go home. The work, the bustle from like the work is quieting. So I went down, I started eating, and I was thinking about, I was like, man, this is really nice. The only downside was from where I am to the edge of the parking garage. There was quite a distance. So in my line of sight, I saw a lot of parking garage. I couldn't really see the view, or I couldn't really see the horizon line, like with the buildings. It would have been a nicer experience. So I thought about walking along the perimeter of the parking garage. And then I quickly shot that down because I was like, well, I don't know if I want to do that. One, because I might get seen and caught, and then somebody will kick me off of here. And then secondly, there had been times in the past where people had committed suicide from the top of this parking garage. So I didn't want to walk around the perimeter. People see someone up there looking over the edge, and I'm trying to get a good view, and think that I was a jumper. So I stayed where I was. And as I was sitting there, I started to ask myself different questions. Like, well, as people would say, like, well, what if people thought that I would jump? I was like, well, then I was, in my mind, I'm talking to myself, well, I would never jump. I love my life. And that was the kind of the aha moment. Because as I was sitting there reflecting on my life and realizing that I love my life, when I compared that to what the reality was in the day-to-day emotions, they were almost complete opposites. When I looked at the reality of my day, I always felt like there wasn't enough time, that I was, all these things should have happened yesterday, right? And that I was, the things I wanted weren't happening fast enough. But on that parking garage, it gave me, well, one, I asked the question, and I was able to take a step back and give myself a real answer as to where I felt I was in life. But then also, it gave me perspective. It allowed me to, in a way, because I was high up, it allowed me to look down at myself, down at my life, and to say, well, how am I living my life? What would I do differently? Am I happy? Am I sad? What's going on? And with that perspective, I was able to see that life was going really well for me, that I loved how I was living. I love the fact that I get to work and do my passion every day, right? Although sometimes that's not the reality of the day-to-day. I love that I get to travel around the world. I love that I just get to interact and impact people through things like this podcast here, as well as through my interactions with my customers when I'm doing the farmers markets. But isn't it true that sometimes you need to take that step back, because in the moment, you don't really acknowledge it because life gets fast. There's a lot of noise trying to distract you. So you need to get that perspective to really reconnect with what it is you want, the purpose, the reason why you're here, and then what do you want going forward? And it's not to say that, am I where I want to be in my life? Well, no, of course. I want to grow. I want to do more, see more, be more. But things are good. And it got me thinking, well, a bad day does not equal a bad life. A bad week doesn't equal a bad life. A bad month, a bad year does not equal a bad life. It's so easy to put a label on your day and then try to tell the future and say, like, wow, because of this, everything else is ruined. When the truth is that every single day is an opportunity to change, to reinvent yourself, to do something different. The only thing limited is the mindset that you're in at that moment. So as I was looking there, I realized that I was just casting judgment on my own life. And it always comes back to that, because this is not the first time where I've reflected and said, all right, well, how am I living my life? What are the goals that I'm moving towards? Is this working for me, right? It's so important to check in, because if you're not checking in, if you're not seeing where you are, then you don't know if you're winning or losing. But also, You don't know if you are moving in the right direction of a goal that is worthy, meaning a goal that is yours. One of the couple little analogies that I'd heard is one, you don't want to run someone else's race, or you don't want to put your ladder against someone else's wall. This goes to say that you want to make sure that the dreams that you're chasing are yours, uniquely yours. Not something that's influenced from the people around you, from the culturescape, but that they are really your driving desire. And then when you have found those, it's not enough just to know, like, wow, oh yeah, this would be great, right? Because what happens soon after that? You get this inspiration, and then life happens, and you forget. There's something you have to do in between. You have to constantly reinvigorate and reinfuse this vision into your day and thus into your life. When I would be outside in the world and I would be traveling, one of the most recent ones that comes to mind was when I was in Morocco, and I was heading from Marrakesh to Tangier. And while I was on the train, the sun was coming up on one of the sides, and it was just beautiful. It was still, and I was thinking to myself, I was like, man, I am so grateful. I'm so happy to be here doing what I'm doing, and the message to myself is just to keep doing what you're doing. I love this. But it's so easy to think that you're losing when you're winning because you're just constantly busy, busy, busy. And part of it is that you're not focusing on your dream, your aspiration, your goal, your direction. And another part of it is that maybe you just let down your boundaries. You weren't creating your boundaries around yourself to, one, to progress, but two, just to make sure that you weren't firing your gun off in all different directions. Said differently, that there was some order and you didn't feel like you were constantly being attacked by the demands of life, right? Because a lot of these things, you feel like they're imposing themselves on you, but really these are things that you have to do anyways, but it's only because you didn't do the planning that they feel cumbersome and they make you anxious, and they make you anxious and feel like you're overwhelmed. But if you plan it, then you're also able to plan a strategy around it. Always make sure that you are staying in a peak state, that you're always focused on your goals, and that you're always feeling good. Let me rewind. Let me go back to the beginning. And the first and foremost is to just kind of notice, what is your awareness? Like, where are you in this moment as it relates to your life direction? And this isn't to say that if you're on the wrong path, to be hard on yourself for that, because that's not going to get you anywhere. Rather, I want you to look at it as awareness to say, okay, well, this is where I'm going. How do I get to, what has to change in order for me to move in the direction I want to go? Secondly, is to get perspective, because it's so easy to think that you're losing, right? Like if you would have asked me beginning of market season, towards the end of market season, and then after I've done my first trip, like you get different answers every single time because it depends on what my mindset is, where my mental state is. So you don't want to make decisions in a negative mental state. You want to make sure that you're stepping outside, you're getting perspective on the life as a whole, and then kind of recalibrating. Otherwise, you're going to make a wrong decision. You're going to move in a direction that maybe you shouldn't because you're just burnt out and tired. And that stress is going to lead you to want to escape rather than to dive deeper and commit further into your goals. And then lastly is to stay motivated, to reconnect to that vision and recalibrate. Again, like, well, what is it that I do? Am I on the right path? If not, what do I need to do, or how can I realign myself so that I am going in the right path? One of the biggest things for me is to make sure that whatever I'm doing, that I'm having an impact, I'm having a purpose. One of the reasons that I come in here is because by sharing my story, I hope that you listening, that it reminds you that, one, that you're not alone. Two, that I want to remind you of those deeper goals, those aspirations that you have, but also just to remember that life is happening now, like not to wait. for, to put off the things that really, really matter to you. My last tangent, I'll go on. The last short story before I leave you here. I was listening to this podcast. I don't remember the name, but it was something about being a millionaire. And this guy, I guess who's a millionaire, the host, I'm not really sure, was interviewing some other person who was more of a lifestyle entrepreneur. And they were talking, he was like, well, when I made my first million, all of a sudden, then I started doing X, Y, and Z. When he was asking the lifestyle entrepreneur, he's like, well, it's kind of stupid to wait until you're the millionaire to start enjoying these things, because you could have $1 million life without having $1 million. And he was saying how his friends weren't as financially successful as he was, but yet they lived a great life because they did all the gatherings, the times they had together didn't really even involve money. They would go ski trips, they go hiking, they go biking, whatever it was. They didn't need to be chasing that $1 million marker in order to start living a life that was meaningful to them. And I feel like that's such at least for the American culture, it's such a good reminder, because everywhere we look, the mind's natural tendency is to compare, to see where you are and look for danger and then try to build yourself out of it. But if you're doing that, you're in a state of reaction, you're in a state of fear, you're in a state of scarcity. One of the best goals I got from one of my financial coaches was saying, know what your number is. Like know what your number is, what you need to live the life you want to live. Don't worry or compare yourself to anyone else. Focus on that and then just go, because you could have won the game but still think you're losing. So you want to make sure that you're keeping score. You're not trying to get more that you do not even need, but whatever you have, when you have the lifestyle that you desire, you've won. So I want to end that note here saying, well, what is the lifestyle you desire? And where are you on that journey? Again, get some perspective. You don't even have to go to the top of a parking garage. I don't know if I mentioned, I got kicked off too. Like shortly after there, I hear like a little rumble, and I hear like a door or something close. I'm like, what was that sound? I look around and I see a security guard walking towards me. I'm like, shit, here we go. And but I didn't get up. I stood there because I knew he was probably going to tell me to leave anyways. I wasn't going to get up and just run down the parking lot ramp. So he came over to me. He's like, "Excuse me, you're not allowed to be up here." I'm like, sorry about that. I was like, this is one of the best sunsets in Stanford. I was like, lucky you. And he made a comment, something along the lines of not really watching the sunsets here. So I was like, all right, well, thank you so much. I said see you later. And then I went down and I ended up going down for some Chinese dumplings. And I don't know where I was going. I just lost my train of thought there. But anyways, the point I'm trying to make is just recalibrate. Just make sure that you are following the goals that are closest to your heart. So I hope you enjoyed this podcast here. I hope it inspired you to get... that's what I remembered. The perspective. You don't need to go to the top of a parking garage to get perspective. You can literally close your eyes. See yourself in your seat. And then you imagine yourself just panning out further and further and further, seeing yourself getting smaller, smaller, smaller. So pretty much until you're like this little speck, right? And then you have perspective. You have an aerial view of your life, and then you can give significance or meaning to like the day-to-day problems that you have. When you're that high up, you realize like the little tiff you have with your friend, it's meaningless. It doesn't mean a thing. Try it out, and then with that perspective, ask yourself about your life, how you're living, whether or not you are really happy and moving in the right direction. And then from that place of detachment, make some new choices. Go in a different direction, or stay the course if you are moving in the direction of your dreams. So that is all I've got for you guys today. Hope you enjoyed this podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoy this, please share with someone whom you feel could benefit from listening to this. And if you have any questions or comments, you can send them to me via my website at www.donnyraus.com. That is DonnyRaus.com. Thank you guys so much for tuning in. Remember, you only get one life. Live fully, live passionately, and most of all, live now.